Jon Thorp is not a Republican or a Democrat. He is an independent candidate for Tennessee's 7th Congressional District, challenging the two-party status quo. He joins me now. Thank you, Jon, for coming onto the program.
Appreciate you inviting me.
Before we get into your policy beliefs, what inspired you to run for this seat?
Well, as cliched as it sounds, I have two young boys, 5 and 7 now, and I have an economics background, so I kind of look at everything from that perspective. And I am not terribly optimistic with the direction this country is going. I think our deficit and the debt overall represents an existential threat to the future of the United States. And I couldn't look myself in the mirror, let alone look my kids in the eye and say, sorry, guys, I did everything that I could for your future without truly stepping up and trying to make a difference. So I'm doing this so my kids and everybody else's kids they can have a better future.
And your decision to run as an independent, what was the calculation you made to decide to run as an independent?
I've actually always been an independent, more or less. It surprises a lot of people. And in fact, it's typically considered political suicide when I tell people that I haven't actually voted in over 20 years, almost 25 years now. And the last election that I voted for was in 2000. And I saw the hypocrisy of that event. For people who don't remember their history, that was the hanging Chad election with Bush Gore, and it just put a bad taste in my mouth about how tribal things could be, and it was purely about whose side was winning and not about the actual events, not about the facts. And so I kind of stepped back and looked really deeply at the people that were running and what they were suggesting that they were working for, what they were running on, and looked at them from the issues themselves. And I just could never find myself in a position where I felt that I could vote for, we're told lesser of two evils. So I just quickly found myself basically independent. I didn't want to vote purely based on party, because they even somebody who claims to be your party doesn't always follow what the historical definition of that party may or may not be. And even what's trending changes from time to time based on leadership. So it was a very easy solution for me to be an independent. Now, when I first started running in this race, I just based on pure metrics of it, we're always told that independents are spoilers and they can't win. So I initially thought about running as a Republican, but not many people realize Republican and Democratic parties are private entities, and they get to choose, make up their own rules on who gets to use those labels. So they told me I was not qualified to use the term Republican. This is a very Republican heavy state. So despite the fact that I'm very heavily leaning towards the traditional conservative values, they said I couldn't use that. So here I am running as an independent.
Before we get, just one more question before we get into the policies. As an independent, and you mentioned that Tennessee is a stronghold for the Republican Party, how are you going to convince Republican voters to abandon their party to vote for you in this election?
Well, I thankfully don't have to do that myself. The parties themselves have been doing a really good job of disenfranchising voters. Depending on which poll you look at, somewhere between 43 and 51% of Americans identify as independent. So right off the bat, the largest voting bloc in the United States is independent voters. So it completely blows out of the water the claim that independents are a minority or they're a spoiler or anything like that. We're simply challenged by the system that has been erected, and we can get into that later. There's an absolute need for election reform. There's a huge uphill battle, both legally, structurally, and just narrative wise. But within the party themselves, there's been a rift in both Democratic and Republican parties, where in the Republicans, for example, you have who some will claim are true Republicans, and then the others are rhinos. This particular race came down ultimately. I think the leading two candidates were Matt Van Epps and Jody Barrett, who really could not be any more different in some of the respects that matter, at least as far as parties concerned. Matt Van Epps, who eventually won, was backed by the party leadership, had millions of dollars of outside money coming into him, into his campaign, and it disenfranchised a lot of people who wanted the more traditional values, the conservative values, somebody who is of the people, for the people type of thing. And these are part of the reasons why I'm running as an independent. I think it's so vital that we move towards independent, because when you have a party, you have specific guidelines that you must follow. You have leadership that you must follow. And if you toe out of the line just a little bit, like Jody did, then you get millions of dollars of attack ads thrown against you. And then the people that have supported him are now basically voiceless. And so where do they turn to? I would argue that if they turn to somebody like myself, where we have a lot of the same values, a lot of the same policy stances, but I don't have a leadership to tell me what I should or should not vote for. It's gonna, my bosses are the voters.
Let's go into your policy platform, education. You mentioned on your campaign website trade schools. Oftentimes in our country, the 4-year degree is a path that is pushed on the American public. What are you going to do for those who want to pursue the trade school path?
Well, I think there's a lot of great people out there that are already pushing that. Mike Rowe is probably on the forefront of that battle. What Again, there's a narrative issue that I think we need to overcome. When people think of the trades, oftentimes and this is just based on how things have been messaged for years and years. They oftentimes think it's a lot of laborious work. You're probably not going to be as intelligent as somebody who goes to college. Your opportunities aren't as good. You're not going to be working, getting as much money. Your compensation will be lower, things like that. And what we have actually seen is that because there was such an emphasis to have everybody go to college. They used to say that if you just go into college and get a degree, you were going to have X number of thousands of dollars more, millions of dollars over your lifetime than if you didn't go to college. But that, unfortunately, a lot of the younger generations are discovering that's not true. You can't just go and get a degree in underwater basket weaving and call it a day, because it doesn't really prepare you for economic activity. And unfortunately, that's just the reality of the world we live in. You have to provide a service to other people in order to get compensated. So I would suggest that we need to look at how money is being distributed. If the people agree that scholarships and grants are suitable for colleges, then I think they should probably be suitable and acceptable for trade schools. We have a shortage right now of people in the trades, so they're commanding very high salaries, and you can make a very, very good living doing that. So we need to change the narrative around that too. So I think it's kind of partially education and partially legislative as well, the structure.
So you believe your role in this kind of a policy push, it's not just writing bills, it would also be having an impact in the marketplace of ideas to shift public opinion and thought on this issue.
Yeah, so I would say the proper role of government on anything, not just this, is not to pick winners and losers. And that's what we did previously. The government said, if you don't go to college, then you're going to not be as successful. And so tacitly, they picked a winner. They said, you've got to go to college. And I don't think the government should be doing that for anything. Leave it to the people, leave it for what the market demands, leave it for the areas, what good, your interests, what the economy needs. It always fluctuates. So the government's always going to be behind, just by definition. You're always going to be behind the ball, and you never know what is needed and what people are good at. So you just have to create a structure, I think, that is fair and open and available to everybody, and then let them choose.
And building off of your education plan on the campaign website, you talk about giving teachers the freedom to teach. What would that look like in our country?
So I think, and this is admittedly a state issue, not a federal issue, but I'm a big proponent of universal vouchers, true universal vouchers that would be tied to the students themselves, and they would be able to use that anywhere. Now, just hypothetically, just to try to get at the heart of what you're asking, as it sits, teachers oftentimes are probably the vast majority of times they're going to be stuck in a very highly structured system. Let's just focus right now on public schools. They have administration and a state body that has basically dictated what has to be taught, in what order, how much time should be devoted to each, and even the methods by which those materials are taught. And so it really ties the hands of not only the students, and they're stuck by, it's the cookie cutter learning, but it turns the teacher into a chef that absolutely must follow the exact same recipe over and over and over again, even though some people might not want as much salt or sugar, whatever. By allowing the market to choose, by doing vouchers, it would free up teachers to go their own way, go outside of, say, a private or public or charter or any of these particular options. They could start their own schools, and they would be able to tailor their instruction not only on what the students themselves liked and worked well with, but worked well with the teacher themselves. And if they want to change it because something changed, it's a nice warm day and they want to do something different, by all means they'll do something different. So it not only frees up the students, but it frees up the teachers to be creative, and allows for an economy, rather a market of ideas from teaching side as well. So that I think we're lacking for a big part of our education system, I think, right now, is that there's not really a market of ideas on the teaching side.
What would be your message to those who oppose school vouchers and may support more of who just support the current system as it exists?
Well, I don't think you have to. It's not an A or B option. I think both can coexist peacefully side by side. If with a voucher, again, the compensation, the spending would be attached to the student. So if you want to send your student to the local public school, by all means, they can go there and they'll have the exact opportunities that they currently have. So that I don't think it would detract from that at all. It would probably pull some students away from them, so it would force them to be more efficient. I'll readily admit that, but I don't think anybody can claim that efficiency is bad for anything. You know, waste, fraud, and abuse is core of all government agencies to identify and eliminate that. So um, I think they both could happen, and this is admittedly an in-depth, nuanced discussion topic, but I think that would be the first start.
On your campaign website, you want to see a healthier America, and you wrote down good food as and talking about the current food environment that we're in. What would you do to improve the food environment that exists in America today?
Well, there's so many different things right now that are harming farming in general. There's a lot of consolidation in the industry. Just the way things have happened over the years. The larger the farm is, typically the more likely it will be to survive. Historically, the small farmers, the family farms, were the ones that provided all the local produce and food stuff for the local communities. And as you get into the bigger and bigger farms, they are able to specialize in certain things, and that improves efficiencies. We have economies of scale, but that doesn't always, just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's always better. And so you can look at these factory farms where they just cram in animals on top of each other, or they're raising produce where it's viable, say in South America, and then they ship it all up here before it's ripe. And so there's a question of the quality of the food itself. And I think you should, again, not necessarily pick winners or losers, but make it so the playing field is as fair as possible, and allow for those smaller farms, vertical integration, things like hydroponics. So there's actually some pretty neat ideas out there around hydroponics, where you don't need as much land, and they'd be able to grow all the produce really that would be necessary for the local community right down the road. And so instead of having to truck it halfway around the world, it's literally coming. It may have been picked that morning, and it's that fresh. And there's I think there's a very real difference in quality, and that in the food, if it's grown locally, not necessarily it has to be local, but just that time period from being picked to being eaten. And that translates into real health benefits. And I'm sure we're going to get into health. Well, that just kind of bounces real quick. I'll just touch real briefly on that. Um, the American health system does a phenomenal job for acute issues like trauma, broken legs, and whatever. They what they don't really do a very good job at is chronic issues, and chronic problems typically are exacerbated by poor food choices. So I think that would help both. Sorry for going off on a tangent there.
Oh, no, no worries. You talk about not picking winners or losers in terms of the food industry, but how would you combat the amount of consumption of ultra processed foods in our country? Because that's a concern that many Americans have.
I don't think you necessarily have to combat that. I think you just need to have truth in labels. So right now you can have foreign beef, for example, be shipped in, and then they package it in the US and they can call that American beef. So there's people can't make good decisions unless they have all the information in front of them. And I think a lot of times we don't know that there is a health benefit or a health detriment for certain foods, such as ultra processed foods. So it's an education thing. Allow for advertising, allow for the spread of information, and make it truthful. Um, and then we could talk about where things like SNAP and the government assistance programs fall into that, because there's a very real question of, should that money be spent on things like sugary drinks and well, anything with high in sugar. We know for a fact that a diet high in sugar is horrible for the body, creates massive inflammation, chronic inflammation, which is going to lead to all those issues that are real health problems down the line as well. And that will be a further drain on society. So do we rightfully have the authority to tell people what they can or can't eat? that's a good discussion I think we can have.
Well, we would probably have to have that discussion for another day because we need to move on to government reforms and your plans to reform our current system. You signed a term limits pledge. Many candidates throughout election cycles, Republican, Democrat, Independent, have signed that pledge, but we haven't seen term limits for decades. Why should voters believe it will be different this time around if you're elected?
Well, I admittedly don't really have a desire to go to Congress. That's probably another political suicide comment. But I'm only doing this because I think people look. I was standing on the sidelines waiting for that person, the right person, to go. I was the one that was saying, "Man, I wish somebody would do something." And so I finally threw my hands in the air and said, "Okay, I guess I'll have to do something." But I don't want to be in DC. I don't want to go to Congress. I don't want to be out there doing things because I want to be with my family, and I have better things to do with my life. But I think I think this kind of goes back to the founding of the United States, that there was a sense of duty. People felt it wasn't a career choice you were making, it was a sense of duty. You have an obligation to do it, as distasteful as it is. You need to perform your duty to your fellow citizens and future generations, perform it, complete it, and then go home. And so that's my goal. I don't care if term limits are passed or not. I would say 2 terms is my max.
Would you, even though you say two terms would be your personal max, but what about if elected, how would you promote term limits in terms of legislation? It's one thing for you yourself to bow out after 2 terms, but it's an entirely new dynamic when you're trying to fight an uphill battle promoting term limits to members of Congress who have clearly stayed there for more than 2 terms.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. Yeah, I agree. I don't think Congress will do anything for it themselves. And it's the same with a balanced budget. I think that's going to need to be an amendment because they have shown that they don't have self restraint. So there are a couple of avenues, but I think the most likely route is what's called the Convention of States, and that the Constitution allows the states to get together and um, form a convention specifically for the purpose of amending the Constitution. Now, the last time we had a convention of states was when we went from the Articles of Confederation to the Constitution. So it was a very radical change. So they probably wouldn't, they being Congress, probably don't want to see that happen because who knows what may or may not take place. So I think as the momentum gains, because I think there's like 23 states or something, and they need 32 states for a convention. As that gains momentum, I think they probably would finally discover the motivation to do it themselves. So either way, I think it'll happen. It just takes a lot of pressure from the people, and that's kind of the whole crux of this entire campaign to begin with. Independent running as independent, people forget that the people are this country was designed for the people to hold power, not parties, not donors, not legislators, not lobbyists, the people, common people. And we forget that because we get sucked up with these narratives. They make sense, and we're very tribal as human beings. So um, it's just going to be it's an uphill battle. It's long, but we've got we've got the time and we've got the interest. I think people are finally coming around to it. So it'll happen.
Ranked choice voting and open primaries are 2 reforms that you really believe in. How would ranked choice voting and open primaries improve our elections?
So Tennessee, we'll start with the second side of that. Tennessee is what's called a partially open state. We do not have parties. You don't have to register for a party when you register to vote. You don't identify as a party when you register. You're just You just register to vote. Now, once you go in to actually vote, you're supposed to pick a side that'll allow you to vote for the primaries. But the states that have closed primaries, which means you have to register as a particular party, it already sets the stage. It's a mental thing. It's like advertising. It's subliminal messaging. By making you register for one or two, generally they'll have Republican, Democrat, and Independent or other, but it falsely puts you into a dichotomy. It's a false dichotomy, where you have basically only two options, and these are the only two options you have, and anything else is in the other category. It's just not. It's a mental thing. It's literally like advertising, and so having the open primaries gets rid of that initial barrier and makes people realize that there's a much larger field to choose from than just red and blue, left and right. So that's step one. And then ranked choice voting, once they actually get into the ballot box, again, people are told if you vote for an independent or a third party, that's you're wasting your vote. You're spoiling. But I would argue it's not. Just the other way around is true, because when candidates are running the major party candidates, when they're running the primary, they are trying to show how significantly different they are than all the other people in their category. So all the Republicans are trying to out-Republican each other and tell, this guy is worse than I am, and look how horrible it is. And then if they happen to get in there, now they're going to quickly run back to the center and say, yeah, I was just saying how much of the best Republican of all Republicans I was, but now they have to now appeal to a greater portion of society. So they have to run back to the center. And if you're paying attention, it's acting. It's all performative, which is why virtually none of the campaign promises ever come true. So ranked choice voting, you get in the booth, and now you can literally, as the name implies, rank your options. You say, I might want this independent candidate as my first choice, and then my second choice, if he doesn't win, my second choice is going to be a Republican or a Democrat or whatever. That would allow you to properly prioritize, properly label what your preferences are without the fear of your vote being thrown away. Because what happens is they'll tally everything up, and if nobody gets the majority, then they'll start including that number 2 spot. And so suddenly it really, really opens up the field for the voters. And why that's scary and no states want to do that is because it decimates the two-party stronghold over this political system.
One last question regarding ranked choice voting, and then we'll cap everything off. Do you believe in ranked choice voting, not just for the general election, but also for the primaries too?
Well, the primaries, it's kind of a interesting subject. The primaries are designed to be solely for a single party. So as it is right now, primaries generally are only held by Democrats and Republicans. The Libertarian Party is the third largest. They had a primary for their president nomination last year, but in general, you don't see a primary. So, for example, I'm running against 3 other independents, and there was no primary for independents. Now, it probably should be that if we're trying to narrow down our choices for the major parties, maybe we need to do that for independents as well. I don't know. And third parties. Ultimately, what you have is the taxpayers footing the bill for a competition between private entities. And I think that practice should definitely end. Whether or not that's ranked choice voting, I don't know. It probably wouldn't hurt.
Before we end this interview, do you have any last words or thoughts that you would like to share with the audience?
Just reiterate that we've been told for decades that we're spoilers, and independents don't make a difference. And again, but we're the largest, the independents are the largest block, and it's increasing every single year. People are sick to death of the same thing. Democrats and Republicans have been in power basically for 170 years, and this is where we're at. So if you like where we're at, if you think everything is just hunky-dory, keep voting the exact same way you've been doing for the last 170 years. Einstein said, what's the definition of, or whoever said it, what's the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. So we're never going to get different results. If you don't like it how it is, you've got to do something different, whether that means you running yourself or voting for an independent. We have to start doing that. But check out the website, thorpforcongress.com. And we've got some town halls coming up, and would love to talk to each and every person out there, because everybody has awesome stories. That's been one of the best part of this campaign, is meeting individuals and really listening to the people. There's a lot of really, really cool people out there.
Jon, thank you for taking the time to do this. And that is the end of the interview. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.